So I'm talking about the future, and it's always been my perspective that you can't look to the future until you understand the past. Yeah? So just a quick review, and I'm not going to go into so much detail because most of you know it. Originally, in about 1997 from memory, was something called CRIT was set up, and the idea of CRIT was, which is the Cycle Rail Integrated Task Force, was it would start to work with the rail operators and Cycling England to try and get some sort of, well, get something done, if I'm frank, because there wasn't been a lot of communication between the two groups, and there wasn't really a very clear way of doing that. And CRIT did some good work, including a project called Bike and Ride, which I don't think Southern were part of, but Southwest Trains were, and I think Virgin were here earlier. Virgin's there. You were part of that as well, weren't you, in the early days? So, and that kind of led on to work that we did before. So when the government changed, we got the coalition, we rebranded the CRIT to Cycle Rail Working Group, we expanded who was in it, and we re-looked at who was on it, and basically, that is what the Cycle Rail Working Group set out to do, yeah, and it's been set out to do it for about 5 years now, and these are the people who are members of it, and if it looks like a very long list, and some very peculiar people on that, there's a reason for that. People like English Heritage, because most of our stations are listed. And these are the things that you come across when you try and build stuff like Paul and the rest of these guys are building. Because in reality, you would come up with a great idea and then they say, well, you can't do that. It's listed. So we have lots of complications in the railway, and we've tried to get a group together that represents all the people, including the campaigners, onto this group, gives them a view. The toolkit. Alex has spoken about this, so I won't go in length, but we decided we needed the quality control. And so we put some best practice guidance out there. It was never meant to be sort of a standard, but it fast became one. And whilst it's still not technically a standard, it is what the TOCs draw on and use and say, well, does it meet this quality? And I think most people have used this. We are adapting this. We're coming out with a new version. Alex has talked a lot about what will be in that new version. And then I needed a way of inspiring, and this was going on already, but when I first came and took over this role about 5 years ago, we used to get about 16 entries to Cycle Rail Awards, yeah, and sort of we managed to put some cycle stands up, and it's quite nice, isn't it? I can honestly say for the last 4 years, these have been growing and growing and growing, and I think we get about 72 entries per year, for I think it's around 10 to 11 categories, depending on what we feel like doing. But it's really, really highly contested. And if you heard some of the talks talking out there, so who's going to win this year? Oh, Paul's stuff looks good, doesn't it? What have we got that's better? And they do. It has a standard, and it makes it very competitive between the talks. And that's a great way of actually getting better quality by making people think that what we want to do is do something better than what they did. And I'll guarantee you, yeah, whatever wins this year will be superseded next year and the next year and the next year, because that's the way it works. I must thank our hosts, because this is a double-edged sword, as it were, because this is the first part of it. They've agreed to be the headline sponsor for next year's award. So I want to talk about a little bit about some of the things we're doing, and some of it we haven't got around to publicising yet. When I speak to the campaigners about cycle carriage, one of the things they've been saying to me is it's really complicated. It's really complicated to know whether you can take a bike on a train. And this is going to surprise you, but I actually agree. It is complicated. And we did spend some good time looking at what the common denominator could be. But when we found out it was 0, we figured they wouldn't be very happy with that answer. So what we did is say, well, if it's not the lowest common, if it's not the common denominator, then what can we do to try and make people understand when they can carry their bikes on trains? Now, we had a very good generic leaflet, but it was generic. And you did need to understand how it worked, and people who were making journeys across different TOCs suddenly found that they get off one train and it had one rule, and on another train it had another rule. So what we did is we developed an app, and that app has now been rolled across all National Rail Inquiries platforms. If you go to National Rail Inquiries, for the last month or so, you will have seen these 2 logos. Now, that one's been there before, but the stuff behind it has been developed, and this is a new one. This is called Plus Bike, and I think you've probably heard us talk about it before. So if you go to the Cycler app. It'll tell you everything you need to know about travelling on that train. Now, we can't, if there's a disruption, if a train's broken down, you get a different type of rolling stock. We can't guarantee that it's going to be exactly right on that basis. But in terms of scheduled train, this will tell you what the carriage rules are for that train. Not for that TOC, not for the railways in general, what a good line of thumb is, what you can expect at that train. And it's great because actually, you know whether you need to reserve, whether you need to what your likelihood of getting your bike on that train is, and it's a really good source of information. And we've yet to have a complaint about it, which is how National Rail Inquiries actually judges success. So on grounds that no one's complained, we think it's right. The other logo is the Plus Bike logo, and that's all about information at station. Now, a lot of this information was there. However, we have really cleaned it up. The TOCs will tell you, I made them go through a painful process of auditing every single cycle parking space in the UK. I was not a popular man, but it did mean that we now have a full understanding of every space we've got. We've even got a reasonably good understanding of usage of those spaces. But it also audited hire bicycles and whether the hire bicycles are in place. So availability of cycle hire, no. Cycle parking, yes. And then that's for your egress station, and that's for your, that's for your, the station you got on at, and that's the one that you egress at. So it'll tell you on the journey what facilities you can expect at station as a cyclist. And I think that's a massive step forward. And it's only a little thing, but it was very complex to deliver. And I think in terms of users, groups, and people using it, that's fantastic. Provision of information, marketing is going to be key. It's going to be key to actually getting to our audience. It's key to make sure people use what's going on. We've been very successful. We had 2 ministers who gave us 7 million. Norman gave us 7, and Robert Goodwill, who's now, I've just been assured by email from the DfT, in charge of cycle rail going forward under the new government, gave us 7.5. And after that, Baroness Kramer, who was in charge of the door-to-door strategy, was so pleased with what we've done. She gave us another £15 million. And with that money, just over £30 million, we managed to do a lot. I'll be honest, when I took this role, I didn't feel particularly proud of all the facilities that we could offer a cycle rail user. That's not how I feel now. I feel very proud of the facilities that we can offer, and I think it's down to many of the people in this room that I can stand here and say that. We've got some great examples. I haven't got some of the new ones because I thought there'd be lots of pictures of those in the presentations. So here's stuff that we've done over the last few years. So this is Chelmsford, about 1,000 spaces. Paddington, and that's one of 2. There's a new one in there. This is the hire facilities at Merseyside. This is one of yours, isn't it? Peckham? Centro? This is your lovely curved roof. This is the one that we were talking about earlier that sort of you can take the back off it and move it, and it's modular. This is Sheffield. Sheffield's great, fantastic. Yeah, opened it, within 3 months it was full. We're building an extension. This is Leicester, another facility. Another one up in Birmingham. Woking, I think you've seen a couple of. Full in 2 days, literally from opening. When we rolled in the minister to officially open it, yeah, the councillor was saying, "This is full, can we have another one?" And he's like, "Yes, to go talk to Conrad." So now they're building an extension to Woking. This is the full site of it. I know it doesn't look pretty, but trust me, that is the prettiest building in Woking. Anybody who's been to Woking's not going to argue with me. And there's another one of the insides. We've worked with councils. I can't claim that this is one that we funded, but this is one that sort of was done with the Borough of Ealing in a different environment. It's a very nice facility. And it also really sorted out the taxi conflicts with bikes and the buses at the front of the station. A really good example of integrated access. So that's just some examples. What have we done? I mean, people don't truly understand how many people access rail by cycle. They always think it's sort of some nominal amount. Well, in schemes of rail, it can be. It's only about 2.7%. It's less than 3%. But in real terms, That's actually quite a lot of journeys. It's just short of 40 million rail journeys. And in anybody's book, that's a lot of journeys. And that's very much a breakdown of the way it is. I just want to explain this just for anybody who's not familiar with the rail network, because the breakdown doesn't represent the enthusiasm of the TOCs particularly. Yeah, the southeastern TOCs is a massive cycle culture that has been developed over the years, and also the nature of the sort of service you provide really expensive. So, for instance, the intercity trains are going to get different levels of usage to non-intercity trains. It gets quite complicated. We get challenged a lot about how many bikes we carry, and I started thinking about this, and I did some sums, and we carry 23.5 million cycles roughly per year. And everybody kept saying to me, well, you know, in Europe, it's so much better for the cyclists. And I thought, okay. So I had to go to a EU conference recently. So this is why I worked this number out. I said, okay, I just want to lay a challenge. We carry 23.5 million bikes a year. How many do you carry? And the Dutch, the Danes, the Italians, the Spanish, and I think the French were there, all said, no, we don't carry anywhere near that. So actually, the provision we provide on train is very good. It might not be exactly what you want, but it is very, very good. And there are very few of our European competitors come anywhere near. And we do that free of charge. Round 3 bids. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, just so people can see the scope of what's coming in the near future. We received 109 bids from the TOCs. Don't tell me train operators aren't interested in cycling. They are. They're very interested. We covered 292 stations from 15 different TOCs. So it's a good spread of interest as well. It's not one or two train operators are taking this forward. This is something we've bitten the bullet on. We've eaten the entire cake. And in terms of that bit, it's 292. We're already working with more than 350 stations. In the last few years, we'll have modified cycling at something like 750, 800 stations across the UK. That's a lot of stations. That is a lot of stations. It's a massive amount of work, and some of the people around this room have been responsible for that. The new bid will provide nearly 7,000 spaces. And in case anybody wants to know what that looks like, this is where we were in 2009-10. We can't claim to have paid for all of these going in. Some of this is partnership with local authorities. Some of it's the TOCs paying for the facilities themselves. But that is where we are in 2016-17, or where we will be. And this is what's left to deliver from the rounds. If round 1 looks big, that's because there's a problem with Cambridge due to planning issues that we've had to wait. And 3,000 of those spaces will be going into Cambridge. But we will have tripled the facilities for cycle rail on station by 2017. And I think that's something you can all be massively proud of. And I know that everybody around this room has been part of delivering that. Right, someone was talking about BCRs with me earlier. We asked TRL to look at what facilities we had, and we did an audit with them in partnership with the TOCs to understand what we had and what facilities we're likely to need, and to build a model that looked at rail growth and cycle rail growth and how that might be reflected across our nation. And they said, actually, you've done a really good job, because with where you are now, you're pretty much at what usage is. You say, might not got all the right stands and all the right stations, but usage is about right, yeah? And there's you've got a little bit more of that money left, so we can make sure we do pick up those places where congestion is high. But we've got some good and bad news for you, because you've been so successful, actually this is really growing. And over the next few years, you are going to pretty much have to double what you have delivered by 17. So we have taken these numbers, and we've gone back to the DFT and said, look, this is where we are now, and this is what the future is. The future is cycle parking at station, based on the fact that there is no more space on train and we're unlikely to be able to increase cycle carriage, yeah, is likely to double over the next 20 years. Sorry, by 2020. My apology there. So, BCRs. And I said this is not about making money, but it's about what the alternative is. It's about how somebody might travel, yeah, and what the cost of that travel is. If you laid a bus service on, if you provided facilities for them to get there by car and created more congestion. The BCR for cycle rail, as an average across the country, is 3.6 to 1. It's a very healthy BCR. Anybody who's not familiar with government funding, anything above 2 to 1 is considered to be really good. So 3.6 is very, very healthy. In the southeast, we have this by regional. This is not published information, so this is something that sort of when it comes out, we'll give to all the local authorities and the TOCs. We have it by region, by government region. So it's 5.27 to 1. This is a very, very healthy area for cycling, and the payback is enormous. It is important to remember that's not about making money, though. It is about what the cost of doing something else might be. We haven't got it all perfect. I'm not going to try and blind everybody with where we've got to is so great that there's no room for improvement. There's lots of things we can do going forward. One of them is signage, marketing, and I think you have some of the later ones, but this is one of the early ones from Merseyrail. If I were to say which TOC has grasped the signage and marketing bit, it probably would be Merseyrail. And as you probably guessed from presentations today, each TOC seems to have done something and got one bit particularly right. They know sort of you can walk around and say, well, actually, have you seen what they did on this? And you've seen what they did on this. But you know, for Merseyrail, it's probably the marketing. They've done it really, really well. They've got the signage quite well developed as well. But the other thing I am very keen to see the TOCs do, and I think will be key if the funding that request we put to government works, will be for each TOC to truly understand their network. And this report does try and do that on a very general level, and we're trying to build some tools out of that that help them understand what is required where and when in terms of facilities at stations, but a strategy. You need to be strategic, you need to be talking to your local authorities about what they're doing on site, what their aspiration for growing cycling at that town is, and remember that actually for the last 5 years, Cycle Rail has been the most successful delivery of cycling in the UK. And that's a massive achievement, a massive achievement. A little bit about what we're doing in the future. We're working with the DFT and an organisation called Car Plus. The name's deceptive because what they really want to do is work on shared electric bike pilot programs. And that, by shared electric bike, we mean bike hire. So we're working with them, and they put a competition out, and they've asked us to come and sit at the steering group, and they're very keen that some of the things that they fund are at station. So they're looking to do electric bike hire schemes at station, pilot them and see what works and what doesn't work. So this is a new area. This is something we don't know a lot about. Yes, it happens a lot on the continent. I think Chris alluded to this earlier. Take the best bits. You can't just take everything because you're changing the culture, you're changing lots of things, so some of it won't work. So we need to know what will work, how it will work, and where it will work. And this is all about finding that. And then, I think someone mentioned crystal balls. Great minds and fools, I think, is what they say, Chris. We're in a changing environment. We've got a new government. Who knows what the infrastructure bill is? Really? Got to keep up. In the infrastructure bill, there's a little clause, a clause that has yet to be commenced. But the new government said it would commence the new clause. And what the clause says is every future government will have a cycling and walking implementation strategy. And that cycling, walking and implementation strategy must have an allocated budget which relates to the targets. And this government has said it's going to commence that. If it does commence it, then that will change everything in terms of what the future might look like. And if it does commence it, I'd be very surprised if Cycle Rail was not a major part of that.